the product tends to move from that central aggregation and goes to what I call the retail part of the process, which is facing off with people that are hungry or availing themselves of social services. So the food would go outbound. You do have the benefit of a fleet of trucks to large feeding operations. It might be orphanages, it might be after-school programs. It's soup kitchens and pantries that we're all, I think, pretty familiar with, that feed a large volume of people every day on a predictable basis. And then smaller organizations are welcome to come in, often with Econoline vans or station wagons, and if they're approved organizations that work with the food bank, then they can actually work increasingly, at least in this country and some other countries, with a nutritionist to see what's available that day. Because since the food bank is built, the economic model is built on not paying for food wherever possible, they really don't know from day to day, will I have a lot of this, will I have a lot of bread today, will I have a lot of tomatoes tomorrow, will I have a lot of juice the next day, or what is the nature of my animal protein, which of course is the highest and best use, and that's very unpredictable. So that's kind of how the model works, and there's been a lot of studies done about marrying food with the social service, away from straight feeding programs, like if you're treating people that want to go through job training, or people that are dealing with AIDS or mental health issues. If you can make food part of the treatment equation, studies have shown people will avail themselves of those programs, and of course if they're not hungry, then they're not focused on their next meal, they're actually focusing on the training or the social service that's being provided. Okay, so this is great, so what do we do about this? Where do we fit in? We were initiated in 2006. We came out of the Feeding America organization, which formerly was known as America's Second Harvest. You may have heard of that. It was rebranded in 2006. And a number of people that helped form the Global Food Banking Network have been lifetime food bankers, and probably for the from the late 90s through to the formation date, were regularly approached by countries indicating that they had done research. These would be not countries, these would be social entrepreneurs, people that were passionately involved in the hunger issue and wanted to help this powerful, develop this tool. They were approaching this group for help in Argentina, in Israel. I'll give a couple examples around the world of where we're working and how that came to pass. In Australia, places like that. And then they said, you know what, we're really part of a domestic NGO, and our focus needs to be in the U.S., so maybe there's another format in which to carry out this business, and that led to the formation of the Global Food Banking Network. Now, you may be interested to hear that food banking started in the 60s in the U.S., in Phoenix, St. Mary's Food Bank. It's still the largest food bank. I would invite you to take a look at it if you ever have had the opportunity. We have several members of their CEO is on our board, and they were formed by a visionary who saw people eating out of dumpsters, and he thought that was completely immoral and inhuman, and he created a food model that has subsequently expanded. It's a tried and true U.S. technology. We have a very mature system, and it's kind of the best at what America does is, when you do a technology transfer, you export that expertise to other parts of the country. It's welcomed help. So food banks exist in about 50 countries. Where they don't exist, we get involved in putting together really coalitions of people who are influential people in their countries who care. It's best done when it's you have some corporate involvement, civil society, government needs to be involved. They're not always helpful, but they have to be part of it. And then it's people who care. It's champions for the community. It's people who understand that the philanthropy, we don't mobilize capital for the formation of these food banks. What we do is we fund the development of them, and the coaching and the mentoring and the technical assistance and the design of the business plan in cooperation with the local leaders. But they need to mobilize capital in their country because it's not only the capital you need to form it, but it's every day of the week. The business model sometimes has revenue streams. In other words, some of the food banks charge for delivery fees as opposed to the food itself to the people that they supply as a means of covering the overhead. But the staffing models around the world, just like in the U.S., are 5 to 10% paid staff and about 90% volunteer. So food banks are really in the business of getting free food and not having a lot of overhead. And so that mobilization of individual philanthropy needs to occur around the world, and much of the world is just not ingrained in most of you are old enough to remember. He's a marvelous, marvelous man. Always been hugely devoted to the hunger issue. He was in FAO in Rome, and part of that appointed by Kennedy, and he's had important feeding legislation named after him along with Bob Dole. Very passionate about the hunger issue around the world. He was our keynote speaker in our most recent conference, but we've been running conferences now for 5 years where we take aspiring food bankers around the world and we provide a subsidy for them to come. They learn about how things are being done around the world. They have very common challenges, as you find when you work with people around, and very common goals. You know, it's to feed people and give hope for families. And so it's been a very powerful tool. We've studied how we're doing, and if enough people are getting enough out of it to form food banks. And we're refining it, as you do as you grow and scale in an organization. But we found that largely it's been pretty productive. We also ran a regional conference in Colombia this year, and we're delighted to see that several food banks have been formed there, where we've given them some remote training through digital online tools to essentially separate people that want to be helpful but don't know how versus people that can put coalitions together. This is hard work. This is nights and weekends. For many years, it's dealing with regulatory issues, social issues, religious issues. It's putting different faith community. I didn't mention faith communities always got to be part of the lineup. But people do rally around food and put their differences aside, but you have to navigate that very sensitively, and it's best done by people in the marketplace, as opposed to being dictated for people in Chicago. So that said, we're operating in about 17 countries. Soon that will be 21, and I'm very excited to tell you a little bit about what we're doing in India. And we think we feed over about 4 million people a day through our system, and through 16,000 points of distribution. And just a little walkthrough. I wanted to keep it kind of skeletal, but Mexico was part of our foundation. In fact, in 2006, we were formed formed in concert with the Food Banks of Canada, which is kind of a mature system of 450 food banks. The Mexican system, which is 65 food banks strung together through a network known as AMBA. Argentina, which we really are kind of my predecessors helped actually found and create, and then the Feeding America system. And so AMBA feeds about 1.4 million a day. Their feeding model is very different. They don't really operate through beneficiaries. They operate, you know, if you know the culture, it's very community-based, and there's a lot of brotherhood and camaraderie. They go to leaders in the community and say, who's suffering? And they become aware of it, and they assemble, you know, food packets with whatever they have, and they do what I call street distribution. They actually go to town and distribute on an unannounced day, and distribute the food with whatever they have. And you know, again, sometimes it's a little bit more, it's a little bit less. Sometimes it's nutritionally adequate. Sometimes it's maybe a little bit out of balance. But you kind of do what you can. And we're working on strategies and programs there to. They're very. They have an abundance of agricultural commodities. Their challenge is getting it to market. They have a lot of logistical challenges. So we're working to do that because that's fitting into the huge nutrition campaigns that are existing around the world. And Mexico, like India, has a huge hunger problem and a huge obesity problem at the same time, which has some huge health issues. So we're really trying to put more nutrition into the mix. And we have some really interesting programs called backpack programs that are very similar to what happens in the U.S., where kids might avail themselves of meals during the day, school meals, but on the weekends they're kind of on their own. And so backpack programs that we've rolled out and created, like the U.S. model in Mexico City, and now we're going to Culiacan, which is in the state of Sinaloa, to give these kids a real you know. So we're hoping to marshal, to catalyze this as a great opportunity in India. 250 million people that are food insecure and no real food banking model. And I saw that Akshay Patra will be here tomorrow. We've actually done programs with them, and we're looking for ways to continue to collaborate with their wonderful model. We think there's all kinds of great things we can do together. So I covered a lot of territory and I skipped a couple of countries, but did I stay within my timeline?
Yes, you did.
Good.
Thank you.
Good. So I guess we'll take questions. Yeah.